I was just saying earlier that it's just fantastic to have so many people in the room to hear presentations around a disability issue. It's probably the last 20 years of my life, it was not unusual to have a room of 10 people, so 10 people in the room. But look, I was specifically asked to speak about the Productivity Commission report, but also more broadly some of the issues around funding and disability policy. But I wanted to start off a little bit more, I guess, personally, because academics often get accused of ivory towers, and particularly academics wearing suits. So I just wanted to spend the first 2 slides to talk about my own story, because in fact one of the things that we've learned from activism is visibility is very powerful, and speaking out is really powerful as well. So this presentation embodies my own experience and reflection as a scholar, but also on a personal level, and also the observations of friends of mine with disabilities who are alive and who are deceased. I acquired an impairment at the age of 18, and it was a good year. It was the International Year of Disabled Persons. Great year for an impairment. Interestingly, I've had 2 lots of diagnoses, and that's technology related, but I was recently diagnosed with transverse myelitis, and I'm also a person who walks and not walks as well. So I've had an interesting changing story of spinal cord injury, and for many of us who are living long enough, our bodies and our minds and our emotions have changed through that journey. Interestingly, I was deemed to have a non-traumatic injury, and I think the language is very important here, which meant I had no rehabilitation. I worked for the Commonwealth Rehabilitation Service, and through it being an employee, was able to diddle the system to get access to wheelchairs, to get access to drugs, to get access to typewriters. Some of you might remember those lovely heat-sealed typewriters that were around. And I had no access to vocational planning. And this system has actually continued. You become a very savvy operator when you're a person with a disability. And I'm now 47 years of age, so I've had a bit of a track record on this. I was at university when I first started, but I was advised to get real by a human service professional. I had a nursing home booked, a bed booked for me, Yarramee Quadriplegic Centre. Some of you might know that place. I don't think it exists anymore. At the bottom of a hill. Great place to put a quaddie centre. I didn't take that up, and then I also worked in a sheltered workshop for 3 weeks because I was told it was unrealistic for me to have a university education. My rehabilitation happened actually through my association with disabled people and the organisations like the Disability Resources Centre and other programs. I'm not just saying that to be nice. I mean, I think I place a great deal of value in peer mentoring in particular. So learning by doing, by watching, by observing other people with disabilities living their lives. I required about 28 hours care a week to stay out of a nursing home, and that was done through the support of friends predominantly, paid workers, so me paying the workers out of my salary, and later on a pilot attendant care program, the Disability Attendant Study, which is still existing today. And I looked at where am I going. One of the things that will become really clear in my talk is my obsession with education and the emancipatory power of education. I did get back to university in 1987, mainly through the politics of envy. I saw educated people getting better jobs than me. I studied at La Trobe. There was no on-campus assistance whatsoever to go to university. And I must say, as a person in a university, it's improved, but not really a lot has changed. It took me 10 years and I finished my degree. I've worked to pay for the extra costs of disability to stay out of a nursing home all my life, even in good times. I'm eligible for very few programs, and I think that's a point came up at the poverty session before. My journey has been a form of self-funded freedom. I spent $15,000 on my own cash to purchase 2 wheelchairs last year, and we will be running a case with the ATO because they're not claimable as deductions. And I needed those to actually hold down my job currently. I did get a PhD in 1999 and graduated. I guess the important point here is very lonely. Life is good, but it's always on notice. So I just wanted to kind of go through my focus and I'll just fly through some of these, sooner than later, and I have PowerPoints available. So I think if we look at the National Disability Insurance Scheme, we have to look at it in the context of living with a disability. We need to look at issues related to poverty, employment and education, and law reform and policy engagement. So this scheme has to be a holistic approach, and we have to get the other components right, because without the other components coming together, the NDS will either pick up an undue burden, and I use that language advisedly. I start from the assumption that if we don't have a new vision of disability, we cannot have a new vision of disability support. One of the things I think in the report that was very confusing and shifted a lot was this notion of conceptual frameworks. I don't see concepts in the abstract. I agree with Bell Hooks, who said that theory helps us make sense of our lived experience. Different theoretical understandings of disability help us ask different questions. The difficulty, as the late Christopher Newell said, is disability is always an afterthought. It gets added on to everything else, it gets forgotten. And until disability becomes part of the mainstream agenda, nothing much will change. I think the good thing about this scheme is, guess what? Every Aussie's in it. Everybody. Maybe that's why we've got a big crowd here today. I'm not sure. The other thing about this is I've got a couple of boxes here, and I'll just read them out. I think we have to learn lessons from elsewhere. You know, the Americans made a really big mistake in legislation. And they talked about the fact that, disabled people are not they talked about disabled people being seen as discrete insular minority. Disabled people are not a minority, and we have to make sure with this report that we do not underestimate the demand, even though it's going to raise financial issues. That's the biggest mistake, that we are not a state of exception. Okay, so disability is everywhere. I also think the scheme needs to look at the consequences of exclusion. You know, what happens in the day-in, day-out experiences of being disabled? Exhaustion, residual histories. We know that the new health statistics talk about high levels of depression. And I thank Leslie for her comments earlier. We need to look at the convention as the guiding definition and orientation towards disability. But I want us to also go into the convention more, because the area that often gets missed out is the lovely radical, I don't know how they did it, statement in the preamble. In the preamble itself, it says disability is an evolving concept that results from interaction between persons and their environment, etc., etc. That should be the preeminent definition, not necessarily the ICF.